What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or mass quitting? I work in local government for an urban county. One of the IT departments reclassified all their employees as exempt, a designation designed for political appointments, fired them all. Only exempt employees can be fired without cause, and asked them to submit resumes if they wanted their jobs back. Their goal was to get rid of some employees they felt were dead weight. But it turns out, the most valued employees, the ones with readily marketable skills in the prime of their careers, just shook their heads and had jobs elsewhere by the end of the week. Furthermore, when you pull a stunt like that, word gets out, and resumes don't come flooding in. They are still trying to recover. I was the lead cook in a $1 million kitchen at a multi-million-dollar high-end restaurant. The executive chef had been there since they opened and worked his way from the bottom to the top in 4 years. That place was his whole life and he was completely dedicated to it. The absentee owners had hired a do-nothing, know-nothing manager. After weeks of complaining, the owners had a meeting with the manager and gave him a week to get on top of his job. The chef went on vacation that week. The manager saw that as an opportunity to buddy up with owners. A week and 2 rounds of golf later, the chef comes back to work and got fired. 27 of 30 employees came in and resigned immediately after. What happened to the chef who quit? Hope he went on to bigger and better things. He went on to much bigger and brighter things. Immediately after, he became a private chef to some billionaires and celebrities, lived at their private estates, on their islands. I used to be a senior staff member at a web agency where the owner was completely bonkers. She'd already managed to run a previous agency into the ground and was in the process of doing the same to her current one. We were at crisis stage. We just about made staff wages for the month. I and another senior staff member had deferred hours to make sure all the regular staff got theirs. We had one big client who was providing about 90% of our revenue. That client was getting pissed as we were behind on a couple of projects, as idiot owner lady had promised them unreasonable deadlines without consulting the team. So I have everyone working flat out. Weekend plans are cancelled. This is real crunch time, we need to keep this client. So boss lady shows up, late as always, and sends all the staff home with full pay. This is at 11 a.m. She wants to have an urgent planning meeting with just the senior staff. Of course we had to do this on the studio floor, not the boardroom, as the studio had the big whiteboard. So she sent everyone home as it required total privacy. We're 15 minutes into the meeting. I shit you not, all she had currently written on the board was synergy, ideas, excitement. When she declared that, whoops, she'd forgotten she had a hair appointment, and fucking left. Oh, and as a parting gift she asked the senior staff members to spend the rest of the day moving around the office furniture into a new layout, most of which was screwed to the floor, as she thought it would energize when the guys came back to work the next day. As soon as she left, the entire senior management staff decided to quit. We checked the incomings for that month, made sure everyone got paid, and then resigned. 60% of the agency resigned on the same day. All the engineers at one job I was in had their contracts changed to that they had to buy their own tools. Due to the specialist nature of our jobs, we were all looking at over £4,000 per engineer. 10 walked and the rest threatened to strike. The boss had to give in and buy the tools himself. Train company in Sweden. One day many years ago, someone found a document stating some changes to overtime policy. It was just lying on a table in the middle of the break room. 1 copy only. Due to the nature of the business, there tends to be a lot of shifting hours back and forth. Sometimes we drivers can get home hours and hours early, and other times we get horrendously late. Hence overtime. This document stated that now overtime forms had to be filled for when we came home early. Undertime, so to speak. This otherwise already scheduled time would be withdrawn, and the company would then be able to reuse that time. Negative overtime. 1 copy on a table, and a few hours later people had come in from all over in a major huff. There were outright and immediate resignations, shouting matches, phone calls to union representatives, a huge outcry overall. Date on the document, and the day it was found, April 1st. Much fun was had. Please tell me someone got in deep shit for such a bad joke? I worked at a call center, and they got us all together on April 1st, and told us they were going to lay off 20% of the workforce. We all chuckled. Wasn't a joke. April 1st is the first day of the 3rd fiscal quarter, midpoint of the year. In the early 90s, I worked for a large construction company in Florida. I was on the road crew. One of the machines we used was called a mixer. The objective of this machine was to mix up the subgrade of a road. It has giant teeth that spin insanely fast. Well, my crew had laid down the dirt, lime rock and clay and now had to run the mixer over it. Well, someone set the blades too low and ripped an international fiber optic cable out of the ground. A clean cut would have been bad, but this cable was shredded beyond belief. It cost $100,000 per hour that this cable was down. Luckily, I wasn't at work that day. When I came in the next day, anyone who was even near the incident got fired. My whole crew was extinct. To put into perspective, the cable was fatter than your upper leg and composed of thousands of glass strands. Every strand had to be fused back together. It cost the company millions. Total about 40 people were fired and I was put on another crew. I used to work at a pickle factory in Michigan. When the new owners took over, they insisted they change the recipe that had been the same for over 50 years without consulting the workers. Some of the employees' parents and grandparents had worked there and apparently felt so strongly about the recipe that 13 people quit, and the majority else were outside with signs the next days until eventually they switched it, almost all the way back. None of those who quit came back. When I was in high school, I took a part-time job doing tech support for a dial-up ISP. The company was pretty small, and only had a handful of employees. My work schedule was evenings a few days per week plus normal hours on the weekend. My boss was usually there before me on Saturdays, but one week I was surprised to find the office locked. As the day progressed, I became increasingly confused by the fact that nobody else had shown up. There was almost always a few people at least passing through, but I'd been there all morning without seeing anyone at all. Finally, after a few hours, my boss walks in and said, "You're probably wondering where everyone is." He told me that everyone except me, the owner, and his wife had quit. He wouldn't say why, but assured me that it wasn't something I needed to worry about, and that, since his job was vital, he was going to stay at the company until a replacement could be found. I tried to find out what was happening, but he said I'd have to talk to the owner. When the owner arrived, there was clearly tension between the two of them. He also wouldn't tell me what had happened, but was very eager to make sure I wasn't going to jump ship. Eventually, they hired new employees and found a replacement for my boss, and things went back to normal. But I still didn't have any idea what the hell had happened, and the owner clearly wasn't interested in discussing it. Cut to a few months later. I'm walking when I bump into the former tech support guy and former web developer. We spent a few minutes catching up, then the tech support guy grins and says, "Tech, so do you know what happened? Why everyone quit?" Me, no, but I've certainly been curious. Owner didn't tell me and I didn't want to pry. Tech, he and his wife got excommunicated. Me, blank stare. Tech, didn't you know we're all Jehovah's Witnesses? Apparently everyone knew each other from church, and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to have anything to do with people who have been excommunicated. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.